Hello, this is Rich, and this is going to be a tutorial on creating your own custom entity with its custom functionality. This is a basic tutorial for programming in Lua with Cryengine. It's been a while, guys, so how's it been going? Um, I've just been really busy. Um, Good news is I got the you know, nice entity scripted with my own functionality. I'm going to teach you guys how to do that. And I also worked on my own custom AI. So I figured out, the basic guidelines of creating your own custom AI and getting it to working. And the good news about that is that you guys will be learning that soon. I'm going to be making a tutorial about that, I don't know, within a week or so on how to create your own custom AI from start to finish with functionality such as shooting, hiding, analyzing the environment. And I'm going to show you what I got here for custom AI, and I'll go through step to step, and everything I show you is what I'm going to be doing a tutorial about. Like I said in the past, I like to do tutorials on things that a lot of people really don't know how to do, basically due to the fact that documentation can be sometimes skim on some topics, and some people may not be able to learn unless taught by other people. So I pride myself on teaching, people things that aren't really documented. I just try, I learn from the documentation, but the difference is I just go over and over and over again. I look at the included files. Sometimes I spend, 48 hours without even sleeping, trying to figure this out. And most of the time I fail, but sometimes I do succeed. And if I do, I share it, obviously. So, first of all, you might notice this new environment that I had. It took me about 2 hours to set this up. It's just something simple, instead of that old, big terrain that I had. I still have it, but I may be doing tutorials in this terrain. It's just a little bit, it took me about 2 hours, and just a little bit more like a full environment. We got these destructible walls, like I showed, like a barricade here. I set them up. I got my own particle effect that I made through a tutorial on the freesdk.com, .crydev.net. I got some vegetation. Obviously, I got some roads here, my custom time of day. Some nice ground smoke. Always adds some nice touches to your environment. I got these trees sway. I got some nice sun rays. I bumped up my global illumination by quite a bit. It gives it a lot of nice toucher, better touch. Here you can definitely notice that it's like a tannish from the boxes and the sun. Different to the global illumination. As you can see here, I like this vehicle. Just looks really nice in the time of day that I got. And if you guys want, I can export my time of day and attach that to the YouTube. Just give me a request for it, and I can give you my time of day. I got some nice rocks over here to kind of give an outline to the end of the map. And I got a little walkway going down. It's a little beach area. It's not nothing fantastic. I mean, I like it, but it's something fantastic. I didn't spend too much time on it, but get used to it, because this is what my tutorials are going to be using for a little bit of time until I change it up again. But okay, I'm going to first of all show you this custom entity that I have here. It's something simple, but it'll get you into the door of getting the basic functionality of how to program with Lua and Cryengine. And making your own entities. It's actually a jump pad. Basically, the player goes onto it and it launches them up into the air using the physics system. It's pretty cool, but it can serve a lot of uses. So I'll actually this little flower. I modeled that flower. Pretty nice, I think. And that bench and everything. Let's see. These barrels are my custom entities. My custom models I made. The house is not mine. The trees are not mine. The only thing that's mine is the barrels, the bench, and the flower, and the particle effect in these walls. Those are all my entities. Everything else is just default Cryengine stuff. So let me just show you. First of all, this is an entity, so we're going to go into the Entity tab. You can have all these here. I put mine in the Physics folder because it's Physics. And if you scroll down, you're going to see Launchpad, and that's not there by default either. So go ahead and drag the Launchpad into the level. Let's zoom in so you can actually see. Here's I modeled this Launchpad here. And let's just put this like right here. Let's go in. Just something simple, you know. Didn't take me long to model. It's a little Launchpad. Let me jump in game, and let me show you what it does. Let me just walk over it, and whoa, way up in the air, and here I go. Okay. Good thing about that is with Lua, you can actually expose some of the properties to the editors. You don't have to keep going back and modifying the properties, closing out, opening Cryengine, using it. You can do it right through the editor. So if I've exposed a property that I've created, I've gone ahead and clicked it, a property here called Impulse Power. And by adjusting this value here, by clicking and putting whatever you want, I think 250 is a good value, you're able to control actually how much it pushes you. You're able to change the model out with anything you want. So you get the jump pad functionality, and it works with any model that you want to use it with. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be this jump pad here. It can be any model you want. And you can just change that by clicking here and then changing out your model. We have the physics section that I've added, just for optional. Currently, I don't recommend any physics being applied to it. It could mess it up. I haven't really tested to a full extent, but I put some physics in here so you can have this thing like if it bumps around, it can move and stuff like that. Or later on you can implement something where you can pick up the jump pad and throw it somewhere else to move the jumping thing from one place to another. So if you have a ledge here you want to get up, but then there's a ledge over here you want to get up, you can just pick the thing up, move it, drop it, and then jump, so you can jump up. You'd have to enable physics for that, so that's why I left it in there for you guys. But currently the physics is off. I just had this options in here for customizability, however you want to say that. The density is 0, mass of 0, and it is a rigid body. But because it's density of 0, mass of 0, it's basically static. And so I got the 250 in there. So after I've done that, let's go ahead and just reload the scripts for that change to take effect. And now if I jump on it, you're going to notice I don't go up quite so high. So let's go, and there we go. Nice even jump. You can go on it as many times as you want. You can also run and jump, giving you more distance. As you can see, I'm on the building now. I wasn't able to go on before. Okay, don't worry about that, guys. My custom AI. So there we go. There's a jump pad. So we're going to get into the scripting and showing you how to do that. All right. So here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a duplicate of this object here because I've already scripted it and I don't want to mess up my current scripting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Notepad++. This is my programming, IDE of choice. I recommend Notepad++ if you haven't got it already. And if you look here, this right here is the entire Launchpad program here. And it's not that much. Very, very simple, as you can see, but it serves a lot of uses. I know jump pads are used in a lot of games. So here we go. That's all there is for programming. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm just going to make a copy of it. That way I don't lose my original thing when I try to teach you guys how to do it. I'm going to Launchpad 2, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. Go to File, Open. Open up the original now. Scripts, Entities, Physics, Launchpad. Okay, the first thing. Hold on, guys. Everybody okay? All right, hold on. Sorry about that, guys. Heard a noise. My fiance dropped the box fan onto the floor on accident. All right. So, hold on. First thing we're going to need to do is every entity needs to have a ENT file. That's a blah, 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 which is your name, .ent, which stands for entity. Without having this ENT file or .ent file, you will not be able to select your file in the sandbox. So if you go to entity, you won't see it anywhere in this line because it doesn't have an ENT file. What this ENT file does is let the engine know that, hey, there's going to be an entity named whatever you name it. Once that's done, that entity file is going to point to the actual physics, the Lua script that's used to really program the entity, and that's it. So we're going to go ahead and create this entity file, and I'll show you where this needs to be located. The file, let's open up my original entity file. Okay. Gonna need to keep it, gonna have a different copy of this as well so I don't lose it. File. Save a copy as. That's interesting. Wish I'd known about that before. Desktop. And Launchpad 2. Okay, so here we go. Oh, damn it. Gotta open up the files I need. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. So this is the Launchpad2.ent. You can name this entity file, .ent file, anything you want, but I typically name it what the entity is. So this is a Launchpad, or Launchpad2 here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to File, Create New, and then you're going to create a new text document. You can use Notepad, regular Notepad, to write this in if you want. But once this is done, I'm going to show you here. And you're going to go to File, you're going to go to Save As, and you're going to save this Launchpad.ent file in your Cryengine root directory, Game, Entities, and this is where you're going to see the .ent file. You're going to see .ent, simple IK object, .ent, rope.ent. This is where all the ENT files are going to be located. Because this is a .ent and not a text file, you're going to want to go to Save As type, and you're going to make sure that it's all types. Once you have all types, you're going to make sure you have .ent at the end of the file, because this all types format allows you to save it as the extension of whatever you want. So all types .ent, all lowercase, and you can go ahead and save that. Once that's saved, you're going to create a Lua name the same name as your .ent file. So because this is launchpad2.ent, I'm going to take my launchpad2 Lua file, save as, and for the for the Lua, you're going to save it in your Cryengine root directory, game, scripts, entities, and you can save it anywhere in this folder here, in the entities folder. You can create your new folder inside of the entities called whatever you want, and you can put the the Lua script in there, or you can put it in an already existing, because there was already a physics folder existing, and that's what my entity is a physics. So I just put it in the physics, and see all these are .luas. This is the actual programming for the entity. The .ent just lets it know that there is an entity there and where to find the script for it. So here's my Launchpad, and this is a Launchpad.lua. Again, if you're not using Notepad++, you go ahead and you go to all file types and you type in .lua, all lowercase, and it'll save it as a Lua. So go ahead and save. There we go. So now we have our entity file and our Lua file. So the Lua file, basically all it does is tell the engine where to find your Lua file. This is very, very simple. As you can see is my launchpad.ent. First of all, you have a tag called entity. Then you have its name. This is where you name your entity. The name of your entity should be the same name as your .lua file, launchpad2.lua. You can name this anything you want, but I haven't tried naming anything else. So just stick with, right now, Launchpad2. So I'm going to name this Launchpad2, and you can see the format here. They have a less than sign, entity, name, and then this is where to find the Lua file, and then it just closes the entity tab here, or tag. So Launchpad2. Now where do you want to find the Lua script? Well, game is already known in the Cryengine root directory. Game is already known to the scripts in this entity scripts. So you don't need to include game. So, but anyways, let's go find the folder. So we have current Cryengine, which is my root directory. Okay. Inside the game, you're going to see a scripts folder. See, you see scripts right here. Well, that's because the root directory and the games folder is already known to the engine. And the scripts. So all you're going to need to do is from the scripts, tell it where your Lua file is. Mine is in scripts. Mine is in entities, physics, and launchpad2.lua. You can see here. All I do is up here, I left click once, then I click and drag up to the scripts right here. I copy, and I put it in the quotation marks. Paste. And then the name of the Lua file, because the Lua file is in the physics folder, so physics / then the Lua file, which is LAUNCHPAD 2. And these are all /, so make sure that any backslashes are turned into /. There you go. So entity, name is the name of your entity, scripts equals, and then in quotation marks, it's the path to your Lua file, the actual programming of the file, of the entity. That's all the launchpad.ent is. That's all the entities files are. So now that we've got that out of the way, we won't need to be seeing this anymore. So go ahead and save it. Oh, whoops. That's funny. I edited my my original launchpad2.ent. I'm just going to paste that on here, and then add the 2, and then add the 2. Now that we've got that out of the way, we can just right click, we close this, we don't need it anymore, we don't need the original either. So now we have the Launchpad Lua and the Launchpad2 Lua. So let's get into the actual scripting using Lua for the entity. So first of all, we got to think about what we want to do. We basically want when there's a collision that happens on the Launchpad, on the entity, we want it to add an impulse to the player to shoot him up. So if you think about it, you're going to need something that detects your collision with the object. You're going to need something that grabs what player is colliding with the object to see if, is it the player? Then go ahead and launch it. If it's not the player, then, don't launch them up in the air. And then you're going to have to use the physics system in order to put them up in the up direction. So that's basically what we're going to be doing here. Okay. Every entity, Lua file for an entity, you're going to want to, let me refer back to my old script here. Okay. And this is going to start with Launchpad 2. The first line should be the name of your entity file, or your Lua file, I should say. And our Lua file is launchpad2.lua. So the first name, first thing you need to write is the name. Launchpad, Launchpad2. And then you're going to put a space, then equals. So basically, the Launchpad entity equals, and then all the programming. And this is an array. This script is an array. Basically, it's a variable that holds a bunch of properties. And how you start an array is Launchpad equals. How you start an array is the curly brackets, just like that, opening up. Now that you've got that, you got your Launchpad equals, and then it's going to equal some sort of array, some sort of set of properties that describe the entity. And first thing you're going to note here is you're going to see right after this, you're going to, in the beginning of the array, you're going to have properties equals. When you write properties equals and then whatever in the beginning of the array to the end of the array is what's going to be available in the editor. These are going to be the properties that are going to be available in the editor. If you have anything that's not located within the properties equals and then the beginning and then the end of the array, it won't show up in the editor as editable stuff. As you saw here, my Launchpad, let me get rid of that here. In my Launchpad, you can see that I had properties here. Impulse power, selecting the model, and the physics. All that stuff here, density, mass. If you look in the Lua file, you're going to see object, the model you can choose, the impulse power, and then the physics properties. So again, we have the Launchpad equals, and then this is all that Launchpad equals, a bunch of these properties. And then inside of that, we have properties equals, and then all these properties. So first we're going to type in properties. Make sure that we're still inside of this, the beginning of the array. And we're going to type in capital P, properties, equals, and then go ahead and start another array, because this is going to, the beginning of the array to the end is going to hold the properties. Enter. Boom. I just went ahead before I even scripted anything. I went ahead and I created the entire array, the opening and then the closing. Everything inside of it is going to be the properties that are available in the editor to edit. And we can go ahead. I should have done that already. And close this. When I create arrays, I like to actually open it and then close it right away, so I don't forget that I have to close it. That way I can just, if I need to add stuff in between these here, I can just add new spaces and write whatever I need to. So now we got to think about what properties we want to edit. Well, in the editor, when I was creating this script, I was thinking, what? How do I know how strong the physics system is? It's like, if it shoots me up 10 million miles and I only wanted to shoot me up, 1 mile, how do I control that? Because I don't want to have to go all the way back to the scripts, change the number of how far it shoots me up, then come back to the engine, try it, and then figure out, oh crap, it wasn't high enough to begin with. Hold on a second.
Crystal, can you close the door, please?
Thanks. And if this is confusing, after I've created the whole script, I'm going to go over it step by step on what everything does and why. So So I had to think of a way of changing. How do I change how much it boosts you without leaving the editor? Because I know already that the properties equals and then whatever's in the opening, closing, curly brackets lets me change stuff in the editor. So I thought, okay, let me put a property here that I can change for a number that allows me to go up and down. And what I came up with is my own variable. These are called variables. Variables store values inside of the variable. As you can see here, inside of the properties equals, opening and closing tab, I have a variable that I named I impulse power. You can name a variable whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. And I assigned this variable 5,000. That means that I impulse power is going to equal 5,000. That's what that means. This is now assigned the number of 5,000. And this is the object model to load. This allows me to select a model for my entity. As you can see, the model I selected is I built myself. I'm not going to go over how to build your own Launchpad. Obviously, that's pretty simple. This is just scripting here. And I had to find a way to load an object inside the editor instead of going to the scripts and then adding, okay, this is the model I want you to load. Because you know what? I might want to have different models for the Launchpad. I might want to have Launchpad that looks like one way, in this part of the level, but in this part of the level, I want to have a Launchpad that looks like something totally different, using a different model. And I didn't want to come back to the scripts every time to do that. So I made it, properties equals, and then anything in here is exposed to the editor that you can change. So let's go back to our, let's go ahead. And here, inside here, we're going to add object. We're going to make a variable that stores the model. This is a variable that stores the model file. And you're going to want to put, this is very important because Cryengine uses prefixes. Prefixes are something, a set of letters that come before your actual variable. And this is object underscore. Object underscore is a prefix that the code knows that's different than a regular word. The object underscore is a prefix that whatever you put after it, in this case model, because I want my variable to be called model, because it's self-describing, because it's going to be holding a model. This variable is going to be holding, a model. So I just named it my variable model. But because it has the object underscore, now this variable is going to allow me to select in the editor. So as you can see here, model, and you see this symbol right here, this symbol means it's an object. That means if I didn't put object underscore before my variable, I would not be able to go here and select an object. By putting that object underscore, it allowed me to actually use a pop-up window to select and browse for my object. If I just had model there with no object underscore, it would just be a variable where I can type in something, and it wouldn't even look for a model. So you need to have the object underscore if you're going to search for a file, and that's exactly what I did there. Is I put object underscore. And what is it going to hold? What variable is it going to hold? Well, this is going to be the path to your model. You could have nothing there. You could do opening and closing just like that, and that means that there's not going to be anything in here. This is going to be an empty slot. Nothing's going to be here by default. So any values you put here to the variables inside the properties array, inside the properties array, any variables you put here and you don't put equals and it doesn't, you didn't put like a path or you didn't put a number, these are default values, as in nothing will happen when you use the entity. You're going to actually have to manually select them to use it. So anything you put here are default values. When you first put your entity into the level, this is the default value. So you could put quotation mark, opening and closing quotation marks just like this, and no object will be loaded when you start it. You'd actually have to select your object. We'll just leave it like that for default here. In my other Launchpad, I actually knew what object I want to load it as default. And actually, no, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and they're going to see that inside the game folder, games, objects, default, there's a box.cgf file. And I'm going to show you. This is a model file here. I'm going to go to current Cryengine. In the game, objects, default, they're going to be a box.cgf. Again, I just clicked and you do need the game. In a .lua file for the entities, only the root directory is known to the engine. So you're going to need to grab everything up to game and past. Just copy that, then paste it, and make sure that you're using forward slashes, not backslashes, and just put your CGF name and make sure you close it. So let's go ahead and just grab this file. We're going to use this as a default file. Copy. Let's go into our script here. Right click, paste. And we have to end the variables here. Object underscore model equals this, comma. That's how we end it. Because this is an array, an array is a variable, which is properties. Properties is a variable known to the engine that does a specific function. Each of, like, if I had, okay, let's see, for instance, sorry guys, I'm not a scripter, but I'm trying my best. It should be blah, 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 equals, blah, 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 equals, blah, 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 equals. Okay, so this is a properties array. That means that it holds a bunch of variables. This is a variable, this is a variable, this is a variable, this is a variable. Because I added this and this after the properties variable, it now allows me to store multiple variables or values into one variable. Had I not done this, this here and this here, I'd have to made 4 different variables using 4 different, things. But since I have one variable here, and I have this here and this here, it makes an array, meaning this variable can hold a bunch of properties. And how do you separate the properties? Well, with a comma. That's why we need a comma. So at the end of this first property here, comma, means we're going into the second property, comma. This means it's the third property, comma. This means the fourth property. So you need to add a comma to the end of your variables here. Let's get rid of these. We don't need them anymore. Save. Okay. Second thing in here, we had a variable called I impulse power equals 5,000. Now there's no specific reason why I need to put a variable here. It's just sometimes with programming, I've learned because I'm just starting with a starting programmer. You got to really think ahead on how you want to do things before you actually write your script. So I came up with that I needed a variable here based on the fact that of trial and error. I figured, okay, I need a variable here. So you may not know right ahead, why is he creating a variable? Where does it come up with the logic that he needs to create a variable? Well, it's just because you have to think ahead on what you want to accomplish, and that's how we got that. So I'm going to go ahead. On the next line, I'm going to paste I impulse power equals 5,000. As you can see, I got a comma here. That means it's the end of the second property. It means we can go ahead and we can write a third property. So you do need these commas at the end, separating different properties. So this is another thing here. This I, this beginning I, lowercase I, is the same thing as this object underscore. This I, the lowercase I, before my variable, is a prefix. I is known to the engine as a prefix. That means integer. So this value is going to be an integer. Or I should say this variable is going to be an integer. So if I put an I, impulse power, that equals 5,000, that means that this variable is going to store this 5,000 as an integer, as in 1, 2, 3, or whole numbers. That's what an integer is a whole number. Now if I put an F here, which is another prefix Cryengine knows, it means float. That means that this value is now going to be a float, meaning it could be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, anything with a decimal. I just went with I for int. So this 5,000 is going to be an int, not a float or a point, a decimal number. So I impulse power because I want it to be a integer. So if you want yours to be a jump power, your variable to be jump power, just put an I in front of it. I jump power, just like object model. If I want it to be object, 3D model, just go ahead and put an object underscore to allow it to search for a model. And we'll see why we need this 5,000 later. You will see. Now we've got to add some physics properties, because this is what I chose to do. And this is another array. Physics equals, and this is another array of properties. So now that you've basically got the idea of arrays, and you can array means that a variable that can store multiple values, let's go ahead and just copy this, and I'll explain why. Copy. Just go into the Launchpad here. We're going to make sure that we're still in the properties array. Still in the properties array. We're not in the Launchpad direct array, we're in the properties array. See the beginning and then the end. So we created another array called physics equals here and here. So here we go. Now physics equals this, then this. So B is another prefix known to Cryengine as bool, means it's true or false, 1 or 0. 1 meaning yes, 0 meaning no, or 1 meaning on, 0 meaning off. So B, rigid body. Rigid body is the variable. B is the prefix describing the type of variable. So I got B rigid body equals 1, meaning that this object is going to be a rigid body because 1 means yes or on, doesn't matter. B rigid body active, I have this set to 0. Again, rigid body active is the name of the variable. And B is a type for bool, yes or no, 0, 1, on and off. B resting, I have this equals 0. Density, this is it's kind of like weight. It's kind of like weight. How much it weighs. Mass is more like how much it weighs, but I'm not quite sure exactly what density is. It has to do with some sort of volume. You know how compact something is, how dense something is. Density equals 0. Mass equals 0. And as you can see, at the end of property 1, I have a comma, letting it know that there's going to be a property 2, comma, letting it know there's going to be a property 3, comma. So at the end of your physics properties here, or first array, first value in the array, second value in the array, third value in the physics array, fourth value in the physics array, fifth value in the physics array here. And this is the first, so we need a comma. Very important, that's why I'm stressing it. Okay, this right here is editor equals, and then this is its own array. Basically, let me just push. Okay, first of all, you can see that this is all on one line, just like that. This is editor equals, and you know what this is because we have this and this. It means the editor is an array. It holds a value of multiple properties. In this case, this just holds one property, but it's an array because you have the variable being declared here equals, and then you have this opening and this closing. So there you go. So this is another array. So let's copy this, and I'll describe what this, what it does. Boom. And because why is this all one line and then this array is different lines? It doesn't matter. Lua doesn't give a crap whether it's one line or two lines. So we can actually just go like that, go like this, and go like that. And it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. It doesn't really matter. So let's save that. And what this means, and this array is actually located in the Launchpad 2 array. And for now, this is all default stuff. This needs to be like this, laid out how it is. I don't know why, but it needs to be laid out exactly this way, but you just need to copy it. That's just how it needs to go. So again, this editor array needs to be spelled exactly how this is, because again, it's a keyword that the editor realizes. Well, it's a variable, but it's a special variable that Cryengine uses to identify for a specific function. And this editor array is located in the Launchpad 2 array. You see it's opening and closing, and that's located here. this wouldn't be located in the physics array because this declaration here of the editor equals is not within this or this, and it's not within this or this. It's within this and this. So it's actually this array editor here is located in Launchpad 2 array. And we're going to be using, you're going to get a better sense of what arrays are once we get into the programming down here. Basically, these are just values. They're not really any programming here. Doesn't really have special functionality of programming. This is just values that Cryengine needs to begin with. So when we get to programming a little bit later on, actually in a few seconds here, you're going to understand a little bit better of how these arrays work. By the way, this editor equals array here, icon equals this right here. This is, if you look in Cryengine, let me just get rid of this here. We don't need this open. If you look inside the editor, let me just turn on my helpers. See this icon here? That's an icon, this is an icon, that's an icon. These are all icons. You know, this icon here. That's what the icon. This is an image file, these icons here. So that's what it's asking for. This is asking for an image file to display as your icon. You don't have to have this here at all, but I put target.bmp. Just typed it exactly, and this is what I have it. And you're going to have this little icon here, the target. You can change it however you want. I haven't done that, so I really don't know how to. But just go ahead and push target.bmp there, and you'll have your own icon. Again, that's not needed. So here we go. All right, and to close this value, because now we're done with the Launchpad 2 array with all of its properties. We're done. So now we're just going to add a semicolon. This lets you know that we're done with this whole array here. We're done. So we added a semicolon. As you can see here at the end of this array, we added a semicolon. And here as well, I don't think I added a semicolon there. Interesting. But yeah, add a semicolon there, and now we're ready to begin with the actual programming. Now that we got that done. So basically you just copy everything that I did here. Hope you understood it okay. So let's go to my original here. And this is the programming, these functions here. And here we go. Here we go, all here. Keep in mind, guys, I am not a programmer, so it might be a little shady. But you guys will get the basic idea, and I guarantee you'll be able to make your own entity script after this tutorial. And of course, after I make a lot of tutorials programming, I'll get better at it. So, now let's go over what these mean. First of all, these are functions. Functions are a group of instructions, a group of things to do, put into a function. Meaning, if I have a whole bunch of different instructions that I want the computer to do, one after another, I can actually put that into a function. A function is kind of like a variable. A function is like a type. It's not really a variable, I don't think, but it's kind of like a variable. You can think about it. You assign values to. So we have function. Like this would be like a type, like this I you saw here. It's a type of variable. Like this is an int variable. So a function is like a type of variable. You can think of it as. So you had to have function, all lowercase. Launchpad could be the name. And this on collision is the name of your variable. See, B, which would be the function, the type. Rigid body is the name of the variable, just like the name of the function is like a name of a variable. And this Launchpad here, before the name of the variable, is actually tells what member the function is available to. I'm not sure if I had that correct, but this function is going to belong to the Launchpad member, object here. See, this whole Launchpad file is its own object, and this function is going to belong to this object, Launchpad. You can see here, again, function, Launchpad, on init, basically the name of the variable, the type of variable. But these are functions, but just for basic understanding. Again, you're going to see the same thing over and over. Function, the object that this function belongs to, and then the name of the function. Again, the type, which is declared by a function, the object this function belongs to, and then the name of the function. Now, in between each function has an end. This means that in between, it's kind of like these arrays here. This is the beginning of the array, this is the end of the array. Well, the name function is the beginning of the function, and this end is the end of the function. So anything between here, from this point, from this point here to this point here, anything between these are what the function is. So here we go. Like I said, a function is basically a grouping of things for the computer to do. So here we go. We have function Launchpad colon on collision. That's better to take this one. We have function Launchpad colon and then the name. And the difference between a function and a variable here is just add these two opening and closing parentheses. That's what you got to do at the end of them. So here's what happens. So now we got a basic idea of what that is. Let's go more deeper into it. This here is on collision. This is a function, obviously, from this point to this point. It's a function. And this is what you call here, this type of function on collision. This is what you call a callback in Lua for Cryengine. It's a callback, meaning while you're playing the game, the engine is actually constantly looking for, listening to pieces of information. It's listening for any type of, communication for the scripts. And whenever an object receives collision, the engine says, okay, something's received collision in the game. Go ahead and call a function named on collision. That's a callback. This function is automatically called whenever anything in the game receives a collision. And this Launchpad here lets it know, because as you can see here, Launchpad, this is the entity's name, this is the entity. This means that whenever the Launchpad, because this is the object that this function belongs to, receives a collision, then do all the stuff here. That's what it means. So whenever the engine says, okay, something in this game world receives a collision, go ahead and call the on collision event function. And then once that's called, everything between the function start and then the function end happens. This is what I was talking about. This is an instruction. This is an instruction. This is an instruction. This is an instruction. So when the on collision is called, it calls this function, the on collision function, and then everything in here gets done, line by line by line, top to bottom. That's why a function groups things together. So when it calls one function, it does everything in here. Instead of having it have to call each thing individually, each instruction individually, it calls a function that holds a bunch of things for a computer to do. That's what the usefulness of functions are. It groups a bunch of instructions into one little variable. So all you have to do is call the variable, and it does everything within that function. So here we go. Local, meaning it's declaring that this variable here, collider player, is going to be local, meaning that I declared a variable called collider player. Remember, variable store a value, because it says local collider player equals, so this variable here, collider player, they can be named anything you want, but I named mine collider player, equals, and then whatever this is. So this variable here is going to equal whatever this is over here. But the reason for this local here is that this variable, because I said local, only exists between within this own function. Because this says local and it's inside of this function, meaning this variable is only going to be able to be used inside of this function. So if I used local collider player, if I want to call that variable like down here or something, or in this function here or in this function here, it wouldn't even know what the heck is collider player, because I said that it was local. And it says, okay, what is local? Well, I'm inside a function, so let's just keep that variable inside this function locally. So this variable, collider player, because I said local, only will be able to use inside this function. It won't be able to use inside here, won't be able to use inside here, or up here, anywhere, because that's what local does. Local makes a variable only last within its, location. In this case, it's in a function, so it's going to stay in this function. So right here, this right here is basically storing the player. So when I receive a collision, when this Launchpad, because this is going to be called on this object, because I told it that Launchpad, the object Launchpad is going to run on collision. So when this object, which is a Launchpad, receives a collision, it's going to first find out, is the player, well, first of all, I got to store the player in a variable. So I have a variable called collider player, and it equals. Now this is another function here. This is another function. If you noticed here, let me just get rid of this. As you can see, this here is a function. It's the same as this function right here. See? Or here. See? It has the on in it, and then the opening parentheses and the closing parentheses. That means it's a function here. And you can see, same thing. It equals this function. The reason why I had something inside these parentheses, just like this, is because functions can hold parameters. They can hold values, by themselves. I won't get deep into, functions, because I don't know that much myself. But just know that there's some functions can hold stuff inside of these, can hold variables and stuff inside of the opening and closing brackets. So let me go over this. System.getEntity by name, capitalization. Oh, by the way, capitalization is important throughout this entire thing. Capitalization does matter. So system.getEntity by name is a function that Cryengine has. And what it does is it gets an entity by its name. An entity is like a player, a tree, or anything that's in your game is an entity. So it gets an entity by name. And we have to say, okay, what name do we want to get the entity of? And that's what goes inside of this here and this here. That's what goes in between the opening and closing parentheses, is the name of what we want to get the entity of. So system.getEntity by name, game player. So we want to get the entity by name. We want to get game player. And so now the game player is assigned, or the player is assigned to collider player. So now local collider player equals system.getEntity by name game player. This means that the collider player variable now holds the value of the player, meaning this collider player equals the player. So whenever I use this in my script, I'm referring to the player now, because I named my player in the game player. So now it knows that this collider player equals the player in the game. Another variable, local, we've already know what that means. Collider AI. Let's get rid of this. This isn't actually used in the script. That was just there for debugging, and that's not needed. Oh yeah, by the way, this 2 dash dash and then the text following it, this comments it out. Basically, these two lines are not read by the code. So when it's when the code is executing, these lines here are ignored, because dash dash and then some text, on and on and on and on and on text, it means it's a comment, meaning the engine won't even use it. So because if I did this here, this would be read by the code. So the code would actually process this information, but because I put a dash dash in front of it, it turned green, and meaning that it's not going to read this code. It's there for me to see and not the code to read. So this is the actual logic here. These are variables that were declared. This is the actual logic, something to do. So this says if. This is a condition here. If. Basically, if whatever, and then you have an opening parenthesis and then a closing parenthesis, meaning if this happens, anything between opening and closing, if this happens, then I want the code to do this. This is what I want the code to do, only if this is true. And let's go over this. And you got to end it. Every if statement ends with an end, letting you know that we're done with this if statement. So here we go. And we can just block out these because these aren't used either. So here we have if hit data dot target equals collider player, then do this. So let's go over the first bit of code. If hit data dot target equals collider player. So we know that collider player means the player because we said here collider player equals the player because we got the player by its name. So collider player equals the player, which is us. So what is hit data dot target? Well, if you see here at the beginning of the function, we put on collision hit data. Hit data is something. These are all Cryengine specific functions here. Hit data. So when a collision happens, it knows a lot about the collision, and that's what hit data is. Hit data is a variable, or actually hit data is an array, just like this. Hit data is an array that stores a bunch of variables. So we have on collision, when it happens, it's also going to store a lot of information, a lot of variables about what the collision is about. And this hit data here stores a lot of information. And if you go to and this is going to help here. Let's go to the free SDK, just so I can show you here. freesdk.crydev.net. And let's go into the scripting manual. Let's go to actually, it was my bad. My bad. Let's go to crydev.net here. And then let's go into docs, crywiki. This is where I get some of my stuff. This is where I got this function, actually. Go into the community docs. In community docs, you're going to have the scripting and coding. Inside scripting and coding, you're going to have Lua. Go ahead and click Lua. Inside here, you're going to have Lua API. And in the Lua, okay, so let's go back to the script. On collision, okay. Where did I get that anyways? Oh, callback reference. Remember my freesdk.crydev.net and the scripting manual, callback reference, entity system callbacks. Go ahead, let's see. On collision. Oh, that's wonderful. It doesn't even describe it. So on the Lua API, go to entity here. And entity. Hurry up, load. We scroll down here. These are different types of functions that Cryengine has. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, that sucks. Well, here's another source that I use, because I'm going to show you what this hit data stuff is about. Type in Cryengine on collision, just like that, and just type in BLUE space MARS, Blue Mars, and it should be the first thing here, create.bluemars.com. Right here, second one, create.bluemars.com, wiki, index, category, Lua. And this site's pretty damn cool as well. Blue Mars, I don't know what the hell that's about, but here we go. Under E, you're going to see entity on collision, and this describes the functions. This is where I go to the site quite a bit to find out what functions do. Sometimes you don't even know what a function does. But anyways, see, function on collision with the hit data array in between the opening and closing parentheses, called when the entity is involved in a collision. The array hit data is a table, which is like an array, information about the collision. So what does the array of hit data store? Well, it stores the normal, which is the vector normal of the colliding surface, the position of the collision, velocity, velocity of the collision, direction of the collision, unless velocity is really low, target velocity, the velocity of the collision, target velocity, target mass of the colliding entity, part ID of the colliding entity, material ID of the colliding entity, target type, physical type of the colliding entity, target ID is the entity ID of the colliding target entity, the colliding entity, colliding, not collider, colliding, meaning what is colliding with our Launchpad. And you can see target. That's one of the values that it stores. So if you see in which is the colliding entity. So what you see here is we have hit data. If hit data dot target, as you can see here, hit data dot target is the colliding entity. So when we have a collision, we check, is the thing that hit, this is hit data dot target, is the thing that hit the Launchpad the player? So is the thing that hit the Launchpad the player? That's what equals means. Equals means is this here and this here equal? If it is, then, so if the thing that's hitting the, colliding with the Launchpad is the same thing as the player, then go ahead and do this piece of information. That's what that means. So I hope you understood that. So whenever a collision happens in the game, it calls automatically on collision function. And the on collision function does this. First of all, it stores the player into our variable, and then it checks if the thing that hit the Launchpad is our player. And then if it is our player, go ahead and launch the player up in the air. And that's a function of its own. And the function is called add impulse. And then this function has a bunch of parameters. Just like this function here has the hit data, this function here, add impulse, has a whole bunch of parameters. See the opening parenthesis and then the closing parenthesis over here? This is all the data that it stores inside of this add impulse. Pretty cool, huh? So now that we got that, let's go ahead and find out about the add impulse function. Again, Blue Mars is your friend. Type in Cryengine, add impulse, Blue Mars, and go ahead. Should be the top one here. And you can see add impulse function, and these are the stuff that it holds for value for parameters. So the first parameter that it holds in the add impulse function is a part ID. The part ID. You can just use -1 for none, because we're not going to be specifying parts, so always use -1 for the first parameter. So let me just open up my script here so we can see this in real time here. Let me just scroll this down. That's not what I wanted to do. Whoops. Okay, so we have collider player, add impulse. And then I said these are a bunch of the parameters. Remember the arrays, each parameter of the array is separated by a comma. That's why you see the first parameter at the end of it has a comma. Here's the second parameter. Then you can see there's a comma. Here's the third parameter. As you can see, here's a comma. Fourth parameter, comma, then the fifth parameter. And you can see here, first parameter, second parameter, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh parameter. You can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parameters. So what is the first parameter? Part ID, just always -1. As in my script, you can see here, -1. Just always use -1 for the add impulse. Second parameter, which is the position. Object local position where impulse is applied. Nil corresponds to a nil vector. So the second parameter holds a location, an x, y, and z, where you want the impulse to be added. I put a function here because this function returns. This function, the value of this function is an x, y, and z, just like the position is an x, y, and z. Well, this function is an x, y, and z. And this is another function called get center of mass position. You can find this on the crydev.net under docs, crywiki, and then the Lua API section. You can see the get center of mass position. This function here returns an x, y, and z position of the center of your player. That's what this does. It basically gets the center of your player. Gets the center of the object is what it does. And the collider player is what object it gets the center of. Just like this add impulse here, this is where the impulse is, who the impulse is happening to. Because collider player is our player, well, the function is going to happen on the collider player. Just like this is a Launchpad : on collision function, meaning this function is going to be on the Launchpad, which is our script. This function is going to be called on our Launchpad, same as this function is going to be called on our player. See, collider player : add impulse, just like Launchpad : on collision. This function is going to be called on our Launchpad, and then this add impulse function is going to be called on our player. Just like that. So now we know this is -1 always. Second parameter is where the force is going to start, where the impulse is going to start, and I just found the center position of x, y, and z of my player. Just use this function here, collider player : get center of mass position, or you can just put x, y, and z, just like this. You would, instead of collider player : get center of mass position, you just use this here. Instead of that, if you want to actually specify an x, y, and z, x equals 0, y equals 0, z equals 1, you can put whatever you want for x, y, and z. You can just substitute it. But I just wanted to add the impulse to the center of the player. Third parameter is direction. Impulse direction vector does not need to be normalized. This means where do you want them, the physics, the pulse, to push them? Well, I don't want to push them in the x, I don't want to push them in the y, but I do want to push them in the z. The number can be 0 or 1. Each number is 0 or 1. X equals 1. If you put x equals 1, that means, yes, you want to move in the x direction. And if it's 0, it means you don't. Basically, it's like a bool in that respect. So we don't want to move it in x, we don't want to move it in y, but we do want to move it in the z, because we want to move it up. So if you know your coordinate systems, z, a positive z is up, a negative z is down. So we want to move it in the positive z direction. We want to move it up. That's the direction. The impulse, magnitude of the impulse. Again, this is the power. How strong do you want the impulse to be? And that is self.properties.iMpulse power. This allows us to change how much to shoot the guy up into the air. How much power does it have? Because as you can see, the next parameter is impulse, magnitude of the impulse. And for that, we have self.properties.iMpulse power, which we can change right in the editor. That variable is exposed to the editor, so we can change that number here
In effect, it'll change the number that's here because it's using the IMPulse_power variable. So if you had a 5,000, 5,000 is put here because we used the variable. And we can change that here. So we change the variable in the editor to like 200, then this is going to be 200 as well because we're using the variable here. But how do you use the variable? Because you see my variable is named IMPulse_power, not self.properties.IMPulse_power. This is accessing a variable that's in an array. Self meaning this whole script itself. Self means that it's a script itself, meaning Launchpad. Launchpad is the script itself. The script itself is Launchpad. So you want self. Dot meaning, okay, we're going into a different array, which you can see Launchpad is an array, which is the self array. Then we're going into the properties array. That's why we have a dot properties. And then we're going into the dot IMPulse_power. Impulse power. So by declaring self, we're going to be accessing the self array. And then to dot properties means we're going to be then accessing the properties array. And then dot means, okay, what variable do we want to access that's inside the properties? So you can see IMPulse_power, then properties, then self. IMPulse, then properties, then self. That's why they're dots here. Dots basically think of parenting. If you know 3D modeling, parenting. The IMPulse_power is a child of properties. See, IMPulse_power is located inside of properties, so it's a child of. But then properties is a child of self. As you can see, properties is a child of Launchpad or self because it's inside of that. So basically, self is the highest, then deeper inside, and then deeper inside there. So now we know how much, and that's 5,000. How much to do the impulse? I mean, because we declared this variable here, we're able to change it inside of the editor. In effect, changing how fast it, how much it does for the power. And then the next parameter, let's go down, is I put 1. And that's scale optional to use only for characters. I just push 1. You don't have to use all the properties actually. As you can see on my scripts, I ended at 1, meaning I didn't even use these. You don't have to use all of these if you don't want to. You can just pick and choose which one you want to do. But just remember though, if I only want to use 3 of these, let's say I want to use the position, the impulse, and the scale, this is still the second property. See, we have part ID is the first property. You can see part ID. The second property is the position of the impulse, where the impulse happens. It's a second property. So, obviously, this is the first property. This is the second property. So let's say if I didn't want to use the first property of, part ID, I just wanted to use position. So if I put the position inside this first property, it's actually still going to be the part ID. Meaning, each part is referring to a property, so they need to be in the right place. So if I didn't want to use the part ID, I would still have to have a section that's dedicated. You see this little comma here? This means it's the first property, which is blank. This is the second property. If I didn't have this comma here, it would think that this is the first property because it's the first thing. See? There's no comma, meaning this is the first property. This would still be the part ID because that's the way it goes. This is the second parameter, so this needs to be the second parameter. So you would still need to have a comma here, meaning this is the first, whatever's inside this, and this is the second. Just so negative 1, just so you know. If you want to leave out properties, you still have to put them in the fourth. Like if I didn't want to have the part ID, position, or direction, the impulse value needs to be the fourth parameter, even if you're not using these, because impulse is the fourth parameter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Meaning this would be blank, but still have the comma there. This would be blank, still have the comma there. This would be blank, still have the comma there. Impulse does need to be the fourth parameter. And if you didn't put these commas here, it would think it's a first parameter. It would think that the impulse means part ID. So just remember that. And that's all the stuff you need to know about the impulse. So this here holds the properties of the impulse function. So let's just go over that. So when a collision happens, again, this is very repetitive because I want you to understand this. When the collision happens on the Launchpad, we're going to store the player, the person who's playing the game, into a variable called collider player. And then we're going to check if the thing that hits the Launchpad, as you can see, hit data.target. See, remember, target was a child of hit data in that blue Mars thing we looked at. That's why it's a dot here. Same thing as self dot properties. Target is located inside of the hit data array. So, see hit data. So if the person hitting the collider, the Launchpad, is equals, you can't just use one equal sign. It needs to be two, because one equal sign is meaning you're assigning whatever's on the right to whatever's on the left. Two equal signs means it's comparing to see if they're the same thing. So if the thing that hit the Launchpad is the player, then go ahead and do this. Well, what do we want to do? We want to perform the add impulse function with all of these properties on the collider player, which is the player, obviously. There we go. So now whenever the player hits or collides with the object, it shoots us up in the positive z direction by this much. And I impulse power, which is 5,000, or whatever we set in the editor. Because whatever we set in the editor changes this value, which in turn changes this value. Second is on init, which is a function. Again, anything with the beginning with the name on, those are callbacks. These means that these functions are automatically called by the system whenever these things happen. So again, function, because this is another function, Launchpad on init, meaning the function on init is going to be called on our Launchpad entity. Meaning on init means on initialization, meaning whenever you first put the object into your game. So when you go to, let's just minimize this. So when I go to the entity and I drag it and drop it into the editor, the on init function is called on that object. So what do we want to do when we first put in the object into our game? Well, we want to call the on reset. Now, if you see here, it says function Launchpad, which is the object that holds this function, or the object that this function is called on. It's going to do this. Now, function here, and then end. This is declaring a function. Declaring means, what does the function do? This, however, says do this function. So function, and then end, meaning this is what the function does. This means do that function, means perform that function. This means the function exists, what it does. This means do that function, perform the actions. So just so you know. So whenever we first put the object in the game, the onInit function is called because the engine says, okay, the object is initialized, let's call this function. So then it does this. Self.onReset, meaning we want to call this function. So whenever this happens, we want to call this. So then it says, okay, where's the onReset? Okay, here's the onReset. Again, this is a function, blah, blah, blah. And then an end, meaning this is what the function is. So, but this means we want to do the onReset, means we want to do this function. So it does this. First of all, this self colon, again, remember self is itself. Self means that the function, set name is again a Cryengine specific function, set name, is performed on self, means it's performed on its Launchpad. Just like it says Launchpad, if this function on reset is performed on this Launchpad, well, this set name is performed on itself, which is the same thing as Launchpad, but I just put self here. Self colon Launchpad, and then, self colon set name, and then again, here's the opening parenthesis and the closing, just like the regular functions, opening, closing. But this has a parameter in it, my Launchpad. So self colon set name my Launchpad, and this is in quotations because it's a string. It's words. So now, from now on, when I first put the object in the game, it's now going to be referred to as my Launchpad. So this object has its own name. And then I want to perform if. So when I first put the object into the game, it's going to call the onReset. So it's going to call this already. But then this is an onReset function, meaning whenever the scripts are reloaded, when you hit the tools, reload scripts, it calls the onReset function. So whenever you reload your scripts, it calls the onReset function. So whenever you reload your scripts, it's going to do the stuff that's in here. It's going to set its name to Launchpad or my Launchpad, and then it's going to check if self.properties.objectMyModel does not equal quotation. This basically means empty. If it does not equal nothing, then do this. That's what it means. So remember, self.properties.objectModel. Self, boom, the child. The next one is the child, right here. Properties, dot, again, the child of properties, object_my_model, object_model. See that? That's exactly what you need to do to access. So in order to access this variable, I put Launchpad.properties, because Launchpad is an array, then properties is an array inside of Launchpad. That's why the dot. And then object_model is a value inside of properties. That's why dot. So if this, see, that's what object_model, if this is what it's saying, is if this does not equal, see, this is the equal sign. This little swirly line here means does not. So does not equal this. So if the value that's on this does not equal blank, then go ahead and self, again, if this is a function here being performed on itself, go ahead and load the object. See? So if the variable myModel is blank, do nothing. But if it's not blank, go ahead and load whatever is inside of, see, load object, and these are the parameters. What object to load? Well, whatever is inside self.properties.objectModel. So basically this is telling me whenever I reload my scripts, go ahead and load the object that is here. Go ahead and load it. So whenever I reset my scripts, it's going to load this object. Just like when I first drag my object into the level, it calls this function. But this function calls the reset function, which does the loading of the object. And then I have another another function called self::physicalize this. And this function is controlled with making the object physicalized. Because without making this object physicalized as a rigid body, you will not be able to collide with it, because it will never ever receive the on-collision event, because you won't be able to collide with the object because it has no physics. So whenever we reload our scripts, and then whenever we put it, inside of the object, the game for the first time, we want to make it physicalized. So we're going to call self::physicalize this. We're going to want to call the function physicalize this on ourself, on our entity. And that function is defined here. Again, this calls the function, says do this, do the function, and this is what the function does. See, function Launchpad physicalize this. So we're going to, whenever we reset, our scripts, reload our scripts, and put our object in the game for the first time, we want to call the function physicalize this. Well, what does that function do? Well, we have the function here, physicalize this and end. This is what the function does. And this is another function that's known to Cryengine. And again, you're going to have to type this in because this is a function that's specific to Cryengine. It's called entityCommon.physicalizeRigid self, and then these are the parameters that are used in the function. The first parameter, see the comma. The first parameter is always going to be self, no matter what. Second parameter is going to be 0, no matter what. Third parameter are what are the properties going to be of the physicalized object. What are the properties going to be of the physicalized object? Because it knows to physicalize it, but does it know to physicalize? It says, okay, what do you want to physicalize it as? Do you want it to be a rigid body? Do you want it to be a soft body? Do you want it to be, how heavy do you want it to be? Or it doesn't know that already. So you got to tell it, what are the properties are we going to use? Well, the properties we're going to use are self.properties.physics. Again, this is the third parameter. The third parameter holds what properties that this physics object is going to have. Self.properties.physics. Self.properties.physics. So the properties are going to be, okay, the physicalized object is going to have one, it's going to be a rigid body. It's not going to be rigid body active. It's not going to be resting. It's not going to be resting. The density is 0 and the mass is 0. So because we declared these variables here, we're able to modify them inside of the editor. And because the function that's in control of making the object physicalized is using the value of self.properties.physics, whenever we change the properties here inside of the editor, it also changes what type of physics it's going to have, because this physicalized function uses these properties that we set here, just like that. And then the last value was always going to be 1. So this physicalized rigid, entity common.physicalized rigid holds 4 properties. 1, 2, 3, 4. The third one holds the properties of the physicalized, which we told it is self.properties.physics. And that is the end of the script. That is all that needs to be done. So let me just copy everything, because I've gone over everything. I've gone over absolutely everything. So let's copy this. Let's go into the Launchpad 2. Let's just copy absolutely everything. Just like that. And because this is Launchpad 2, I got to add this. Launchpad 2. Bum, 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 bum. At the beginning of every of my functions. Launchpad 2. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Launchpad 2. Launchpad 2. Launchpad 2. Launchpad 2. One thing we need to go over is this function here. Again, anything begins with on is a callback, meaning whenever you change a property inside of the properties panel, which is obviously this, whenever you change one of these properties, it calls this function. Whenever you change a property here, it calls this function. And we just want to, when it calls that function, when we change a property, we just want it to, do the function on reset. We just want it to do the stuff in here whenever we change a property. And that's it. So let me just go over first, go over everything, so that now we've done it, we can actually get what everything means. First of your entity script is the name of your entity. Launchpad equals, and then these are all the properties that the Launchpad array holds. Inside the Launchpad array, we have a properties array, which are the properties that are exposed to the editor that you can change. And here we have the variables, so we can choose the object inside of the editor, and we can choose how much the physics is for bouncing the object up in the air. This here, physics, is a control of the properties that the physics system use to physicalize the object. And this is its own array in here. This here is inside of the Launchpad array. This saying that the Launchpad is going to use this icon for it. The function Launchpad on collision hit data with the hit data parameter is in control of whenever a collision happens to this object, it stores the player inside of the local collider player variable, and then it checks if the thing colliding with the Launchpad is the player. Then if it is, it goes ahead and it does the add impulse function, which shoots the player up in the positive z direction using this strength, which is the I impulse variable, uses that strength, which is 5,000. Where to start the impulse, where does the impulse happen on the player, and I just put it at the center of mass position. And these are just basic things that you need on a script. You need an on init function, you need an on reset function, you need an on property change, you don't need this, but we described that this function here, physicalize this, is a Cryengine specific function that makes an object rigid body or adds physics to the object. Now, one thing you are going to need to do that this script will not work is that we told this onCollision function to call a function that's called system.getEntityByName. And what entity you get by name? We want to get the entity that its name is GamePlayer. Well, currently you're going to find there is no entity called GamePlayer. This is something that I had to do myself. What is the GamePlayer? The GamePlayer is a player, and that player script is called player.lua. And let me just show you. We're going to open that because we need to. Go to open, because the script will not work without it. Go to my root directory, game, scripts, AI, scripts, entities, actor, player.lua. You're going to need to change this. As you can see, a quarter down the page, I found the function on init. This is where you need to put it. Function on init. So when the player is first added to the game, we want to set its name. Self, set name. So we want to call the set name function on itself, which is the player script. And then this accepts a parameter, and we named it game player. So we named the player, we set its name to game player. So now the player has a name called game player. That's why this part of the script works, because we told it to take the player's name, get the entity that, get the entity whose name is game player, and assign it to our Collider player. That's how come Collider player is now our player, because we told it to get the entity whose name is game player, and we changed our player.lua, to have the name, set name, game player. And that is all you need to do. So let's get out. Entity. And if you look here, you're going to see before I only had Launchpad 1. Now I have Launchpad 2. I can take that and bring it into the world. Oh, whoops. My bad. Just ignore everything here. There's a reason why it gave me that error. Just hold on. Because I saved my Launchpad 2 Lua script on my desktop, and it's not supposed to be on my desktop. It's supposed to be in the game. If you remember correctly, we did this at the beginning of the tutorial. Game, scripts, entity, physics. Huh. Interesting. Never mind. None of this concerns you. It's something that I did when I saved my files, when I duplicated and saved. First of all, my Launchpad file, save as, is on the desktop. It's not supposed to be there. Again, don't worry about this. This is something that I did wrong that you guys wouldn't have done wrong. Game. Scripts, entities, physics, delete, delete. Entity Launchpad 2. You've got to be kidding me. Anyways, we're going to close out of this. I don't want to save my changes. File. Open. Again, this is something I did wrong, not you. Entities. Oops. Games. Entities. Launchpad 2. File open. Launchpad 1. Alright, everything seems to be on order. Let me just open this up. Because sometimes you do need to reload your scripts in order for it to work. I'm sorry, restart the editor for some of these scripts to work. Most of the time you can just reload your script. Some of the times you do need to restart the editor entirely. We'll go to entities, physics. We should have Launchpad 1. And it failed to load my scripts, which is weird as hell. Which I don't know why it failed. Can now open scripts, entities, physics. Launchpad, no such file or directory. What do you mean it doesn't exist? You guys just saw that, didn't you? You guys saw that. Of course he's existing. You guys just saw that. It's getting upsetting. Game. Scripts. Entities. Physics. There was something here, Launchpad file. Well, anyways, you have Launchpad and Launchpad 2. So they do exist. I don't know why it's telling me it doesn't exist. Cryengine bug. Get rid of these. Again, it's something I did apparently. Something I did apparently, not anything you guys did. File, open. I hate when this happens.
Avast virus database has been updated.
Let's try this again. Entity, physics, Launchpad. Look at that. Failed to load script file. Scripts, entities. Bullshit, man. 100% bullshit. They're saying they don't freaking exist. I'm just basically making new files because somehow they got messed up. But the programming is fine about it. It's now not knowing where to find the files, and that's a freaking just a bug. Sorry about that, guys. Dun, 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 dun. That's great. Don't worry about the scripting, guys. That's 100% correct. For some reason, as you can see, failed to load script file. It doesn't even know where to find the freaking script file. Very upsetting. I had that. Now I have to reprogram the whole freaking thing. Again, doesn't know where to freaking find the thing. It's very upsetting. Very upsetting. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap this up here. I'm getting a lot of crap from my lady. So I'll continue the AI, but I'm going to teach her in a little bit. Thanks.